Hey, yes. How's it going?
There we go. How you guys doing?
Good.
How are you?
Good, doing well.
I don't know if I'm sure Josh let you know that I have Jarred on the podcast with me today.
All good.
All right, cool. He's a weightlifting coach close by here in Rhode Island as well. He's been to a couple of national meets as well. You guys might have bumped into each other in the past at some point.
Yeah, he looks familiar. I'm terrible with names, but I'm pretty good with faces.
I introduced myself once a couple of years ago, maybe. You coach Lena, who has come to my gym a few times. Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, just to make sure the audio's sounding all right on your end.
Yeah, you're good. How am I?
Yeah, sound great. Perfect. And yeah, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast. I mean, this is a super exciting one for us. We've definitely been following your stuff for a long time, so really pumped to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate
of course. It. So so I have the outline here. We're gonna kind of just go through, but if we go off on a tangent on something, that's totally fine too. So just gives us something to work with. But so usually I'll start off with just a quick intro on you, a couple rapid fire questions to get it going, and then we'll get right into it.
Sounds good.
The Road to Strength podcast is now brought to you by Rob Levine, the heavy hitter. We've been really happy to have them jump on as a sponsor. I've personally used them this past year. My wife was in a car accident, and they were able to help us along every step of the way through getting properly compensated, making sure we weren't getting taken advantage of by the car insurance companies, and helping through with medical payments. So if you've been in a car accident, it's definitely worthwhile. Just pick up the phone and see how they can help.
All right. So what's going on, guys? Dr. Matt here, host of the Road to Strength podcast. We got co-host Jarred Smith on today and special guest Max Aita. How's it going, Max?
It's going well. Doing pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super pumped to have you on today. I mean, you have quite a few accolades. We'll just list a few off right now. So you're owner of Max Gym in Oakland, California. Yeah. Is that where you're at right now? Are you in California?
Yeah, we're in Oakland.
Cool. You run the Coach Logic podcast, and you've been a coach to national record holder powerlifters and weightlifters for well over 10 years, longer than that now.
Yeah, probably. I guess I started coaching probably officially 2007.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting close to the 20-year mark.
Yeah. Time's going too fast.
Yeah, it is.
As I say that, I'm like, oh man, this has been a while.
One of the first times I had heard your name, actually, and I just re-listened to the podcast the other day, was on the Barbell Shrugged podcast where those guys came out to see you. So that was a cool one. I gave that one a re-listen the other day. That was 2017 was that podcast. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
So just quick to start off, we're going to go through some rapid fire questions. These are some of them are off topic from weightlifting, but I think they're just interesting. So we'll get right into these. So we got favorite coffee shop. This could be somewhere in Oakland or just anywhere in the U.S.
I would say not a bespoke coffee shop, but there's a coffee chain out here called Pete's.
Pete's? Okay,
yeah. I actually like their coffee. I think on average it's better than most.
Sure.
Kind of a sure thing,
Yeah.
It's consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question, same thing. Could be a local spot. Could be something you make on your own. Oh, get the dog trying to join us. Favorite go-to breakfast spot or something you make on your own.
Man, I eat whatever is I can grab and get in my car and drive away with. I mean, it could be anything. Usually eggs, probably just some fried eggs or something.
Nice. Egg is a go-to. I like it.
Yeah.
Favorite. So, this is the interesting question. Favorite recent book, or just let's make this a little more specific for weightlifting. So I guess it doesn't have to be recent, but I guess what's a book that you've read that has impacted or you've gotten the most out of for your coaching, or something that comes to mind?
I would say The Scientific Principles of Strength Training by Israel and Smith. That was probably the best book I've read recently.
Nice.
Even though that wasn't that recent.
When did you read it?
I mean, I probably read it when it came out, now almost 8 years ago.
Cool. Yeah, I like his stuff a lot. It was Israel and who else was the co-author on it? Jarred Smith. Okay, cool. Next question we got favorite. I mean, this is another interesting question because as far as weightlifting coaches, I think you're probably one of the top podcasters. But favorite recent podcast?
Oh man, that's a tough one because like I listen to a bunch of podcasts, but I feel like I don't listen to full podcasts that much.
Sure.
One thing I've been listening to is On Coaching. It's like a running podcast, but those guys do a pretty good job of like just talking about like the general like nature of sport and training and coaching, which is kind of cool.
Awesome. Oh yeah, I wouldn't expect that. Running.
Yeah.
Little switch up. Next one, we got a very similar question. Favorite Instagram accounts, could be related to weightlifting, could be something that just comes up on your feed and you're like, oh, that's cool, or that's funny, that makes me laugh.
Oh man, yeah, it's probably some terrible meme account or something. I don't even know. Like I would say there's a favorite one. I mean, obviously, like I love Weightlifting House, Hook Grip, like
Yep.
Those are super cool. I feel like the ones I love are like the meme accounts that mock or make fun of the financial influencers that are just like so full of shit.
Yeah.
So I just kind of enjoy that like really dry humor. So anything that has that.
Like is it entrepreneur is one of them?
Yeah,
I think
yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, right. Like, totally.
Do you like any of the do you listen to any of the weightlifting or you see any of the weightlifting meme pages?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the meme pages are interesting because I feel like back, I mean, God, it's so old now, like, 2016 to 2020, the meme pages were like ruthless and they were just like, everybody was getting blasted. Yeah, it was like borderline criminal, right?
Yes.
And now it feels like they've probably had to tone down a bit from that kind of humor.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more like, sort of mainstream feeling, but like those old days when it was just like, Travis Masher getting roasted or we would get roasted, whoever it was like, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. It was cringy, but at the same time, like, wow, I can't believe they're saying this stuff right now.
Yeah, totally.
That was an interesting time.
Yeah, those meme account people had no fear with what they were putting out there.
The names were hilarious too. Like I think there was a
Chungus Talakot.
Yeah.
Or
Penn Glenblay.
Yeah. What West Kiss was it was Wet Kiss.
Yeah, Wet Kiss was great. Yeah.
Those are great. Next question, and this is probably a little more towards like current day. Somewhere you've traveled recently, or you're going. Where are you going? Like on Friday, right?
No, I'm literally flying after this. We're leaving here and going straight to the airport. So we're going to be in Thailand in the next 24 hours.
That's crazy.
All right. And that's for competition?
Yeah, for the World Cup.
Nice. Okay. All right.
Max, are you guys doing the commentary for this one?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, we'll do the commentary for this one. It'll be on Weightlifting House TV.
Sweet.
Very cool.
And that starts on Sunday is the first session? Or how does the time change work with here and there?
I think it'd be Saturday for us here.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Or it might be Sunday. I can never tell. It could be Sunday for us here, but it's Monday there. I never know.
You'd probably be able to Google it quickly and see like, all right, what's the time zone change?
Yeah. For sure.
We got two or three more questions, quick ones for you. Favorite shoe or sneaker, weightlifting?
I used to love the original Adidas, like 2000. It had like 3 buckles, 3 straps on it. They would always break. Little wooden heel. That was like the first pair I had. Those like you see them in like old videos now, where Demos is wearing them or something. Like those shoes, I love those. Those were really good.
Nowadays they sell them for like $1,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
You can find them.
If someone had told me like 20 years ago, hey, one day there's going to be like a collector weightlifting shoe market, I would have just been like, you're full of shit. Like, there's no way.
Right.
Who's collecting them? But there are people.
Yeah, it's crazy that what Hook Grip and people are getting away with charging. I mean,
supply and demand, I guess, right?
$1,000. Like you like go and find some like shipping container full of those 2008 Adastars or whatever, and like I'm rich, like $1,000 a pair, just insane.
you gotta find somebody that doesn't know what they're worth and buy it from them.
Yeah.
I have a member who was at a thrift shop somewhere in like Vermont or New Hampshire or something. And it wasn't an old pair, but it was a pair of the Romaleo 2s. and he was playing dumb with the lady and said, "Oh, what are these? Like an old bowling
nice.
shoe?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, I don't actually know what those are." And he's like, "Oh, what do you want for them?" And she was like, like $3." And so he got them for like $3.
Wow.
You know what I love is like I've had so many stories I've heard of people seeing people wearing weightlifting shoes in public. My wife and I were our family was visiting, and we were up in Napa at like a winery, and this dude was walking around in Adidas weightlifting shoes, like and like full on like just walking through these vineyards in the wine. Like it was like you have no idea what you're wearing, do you, bud? Like he's like, no, they're just comfortable.
Called fashion, Max.
Yeah. Yasha Faye told me a story about one time he was in like a nightclub in somewhere in Europe and like looked down and this dude was dancing in weightlifting shoes.
That's too funny.
Yeah, totally weird.
Maybe he was doing in the winery. He was using those to crush the grapes. Maybe that flat sole is it works good.
Right. Just imagine like if you had to like run in them.
Oh
like,
God,
that's just the weirdest thing. I always felt weird if I wore them outside the gym.
Yeah,
like, oh, no,
yeah.
They're like tainted. I've touched like concrete with these. Like this is awful.
Oh yeah. I definitely, if I had to go grab something out of my car, I'd take them off. I mean, like, oh, I can't wear these outside.
Right.
Next rapid fire we got, and this is probably too general of a question, but current favorite, maybe like what's one thing that you're liking right now, maybe in your programming or for your athletes, as far as like accessory or weightlifting variation or movement.
I've been having people do a lot of like no contact cleans, and I didn't do a lot of them before. But I like that. I think that's a pretty good movement for some people, obviously, just depending on what they need. But yeah, I've got a few people that have been doing them that I really like, which is fun to watch.
What is the as far as like, is there a certain reason to implement that? Is like if they're like getting the bar too far ahead of them, or I guess there's probably a tough question because there's probably a lot of reasons, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the key elements that something like no contact emphasizes is like anything that can be degraded because you have too much of a like emphasis on the explosion. So you don't pull well after the contact, so your final extension is a little bit lagging, or that connection to the bar is kind of weak. Or if you're really early, you try to rush really aggressively. So if you remove that explosion, you kind of allow the athlete to emphasize or force them to emphasize those other parts basically all around the explosion, where as they pass the knee, they kind of have to be more patient, stay back, bring the bar in. They have to keep pulling basically at the point where they would normally make contact with the bar. So that element just kind of has this effect of like flattening out the pull a little bit and making it a little bit more of a I don't even know how to describe it, but like a muscular effort versus like this impulsive effort where you just pop the bar off your hips. So this way you're kind of forced to connect with the bar better, especially on the top of the pull and the turnover. So I like it for that.
Cool. I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You take away almost like their power boost position.
Yeah.
Like, all right, let's see if we can finish the clean a little better.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I like that. And this is an interesting question, but this is our last rapid fire. So you're coaching a lot of people in person right now too at the gym, right? So I think this relates. What's your favorite pump up or like max out or gym song for people?
Currently. You know, we never listened to music when I trained when I was coming up. Like it was just like more so just because like there was no stereo. It was like a tiny little space. And it was kind of normal that you didn't listen to music. And I think that was just like one of those old school things. So I don't really have that. I mean, when I was like powerlifting, it was always kind of like, you know, put some kind of metal on or something that was like fast and upbeat. But like, I've never been like a huge, like I have a song or something like that, or had, you know, headphones on before I lifted, which is probably more just to say that I'm a pretty boring person, but it was more like, I just never had that like one particular song, you know?
Fair. No, I like that. I keep that question because I get all sorts of different answers.
I bet.
So I like that. All right. So getting into your background a little bit. So I know you've probably told this story a million times, but I think it's really unique and really interesting. So can you give us just maybe like a brief overview of how you got into weightlifting, and then kind of touch upon, you know, some of the training with the Bulgarians?
Yeah. So I started, the way I tell the story is like when I was about 12 years old, I saw the 96 Olympics on TV. We were watching it, right? It was like in the summertime. We were watching this. And I remember like I always wanted to be strong when I was little. Like I always wanted to be like strong and be this like strong kid or, like superhero kind of person. And I remember when they showed this tiny clip of Naim Suleimanalu winning his third gold medal, and it was like 10 seconds long, but it was like him making the final clean and jerk, and it was like historic moment. He makes a third gold, and I was like, the second I saw that, I was like, I've got to be a weightlifter. Like that's the pinnacle of this journey would be, and so it was always like an Olympic weightlifter, and I basically just kind of from that point on started like, lifting weights with like, like at my dad's, like whatever, plastic and sand weights in the garage. And I started squatting like every day. And it was kind of this typical, like, okay, I'll do that. And then as I got a little older, I was still doing it, still lifting. I would get into more formal situations, go to a gym or something like that. But I eventually met my coach, Steve Goff, who had retired to Montana from San Francisco, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I was like driving out to his house like basically every day, and training like from like 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. at night, and then like I'd go home and I'd work at night, and like it was just like that was the thing, and so I just was training as hard as I could. And it was kind of cool because it was like, oh, the Bulgarian thing. I started doing that. He knew he was there, like in the warm-up room with Naim, and so he would tell me about like that event and tell all these crazy stories. So I kind of got like ingrained into this like Bulgarian mindset, like this is how it's supposed to be done, and all these things, because they were great. And like you're young and new, and you don't really grasp it, or you kind of have maybe some denial that like, oh, there's something else going on. But yeah, so I did that, and then eventually, like to kind of make a long story shorter, Abajev came to the U.S. Dave Spitz brought him out, did this whole thing. Dave originally was bringing him out to try and coach him to get to the Olympics. His whole thing was like he'd just bring this guy out, bring some lifters with him. They would train him, and then he would qualify and go. Good intentions, but that just didn't work for many reasons. It was just obvious that like that sort of thing wasn't going to happen. But he invited people to come out, and I was the only one that actually took him up on the offer, like officially, because when Abajev came here, Thomas Ayan sent some memo out to the entire U.S. Federation saying anyone who trains with this guy will be banned from international competition.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so like nobody wanted to touch it. But I wasn't going to any international competition, so I didn't think it was a big deal.
Max, what year was this?
This would have been like 2007, I think.
Okay.
And then from then on, I trained with him, and we Martin Pashov, a good friend of mine, who I just saw in Bulgaria like a couple months ago or a month ago. He was kind of this Bulgarian guy that came out, and he sort of took me under his wing as far as like kind of giving a bigger explanation as to how the system is and how to actually train, like protect yourself and do all this shit to sort of like, not always be pushing yourself so hard. But yeah, that was like the whole thing. And then I eventually got hurt at Cal Strength, and, my wrist was destroyed, so I couldn't do the lifts anymore. And that kind of pushed me into coaching. And then I started doing a little bit of powerlifting just because I couldn't do weightlifting. And I wanted to still be competitive and do those things, but I basically became a full-time coach after that injury, and that was kind of the end of it.
That's cool. I guess to fill in the gaps for a lot of the audience too, the Bulgarian system is kind of well known in the weightlifting world, even the CrossFit world. People know about it as far as like, oh my God, like I can't believe what they were doing over there, like maxing out every day, multiple times a day. Like that's so crazy. But you were doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like, it sounds really romantic from the outside. Like, oh, you're going to like it. Oh, it makes so much sense. Just max out on the things you want to get good at, and you're going to get good at them. But like, there's always caveats. No one sort of really mentions the nuance to it, but also like, every single guy I've talked to that did it, Piros, would say that he would sneak in and do these other exercises on different times. Like he loved to do like snatch, push, press. And there was a guy, some Bulgarian guys telling us a story in Bulgaria that like when Abajev would leave for the day, they would do a bunch of pulls and stuff. And so like there's always this little bit of like what's really going on there. I think the better definition of the Bulgarian system is like to be called like the Bulgarian era. It was just an era where that team was super dominant for a lot of reasons. Like they had this great coach, they had this great energy, the team was getting a ton of resources, their lifters were exceptional, they had an aggressive approach, they were trying to win medals. They had some other things, they were able to pass drug tests. Like, so there's this whole thing around it that maybe kind of makes it into more of an era than it is like a system. Because I don't think the system has really ever been like tit for tat applied somewhere else and been super successful. It usually gets modified in some way.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's more than just numbers or a program on an Excel sheet. There's a whole lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, totally.
And then also for the reader or the listener, I guess, no, there's no readers. For the listeners, you also lived with, I don't know if I might have missed that if you mentioned that. You lived there for in one house with all the lifters for a few months or a few years, or?
No, it was, I don't remember how long, maybe 8 months or so. But yeah, we all lived in the same house and then lifted in the garage. Yeah,
which I'm same thing. You don't really find that, I don't think, with any sort of like lifting nowadays.
Yeah. It's probably a safe sport violation now.
yeah. No, that's really cool. So you were fully immersed in it. So I guess I want to transition another kind of story I think you've told a lot of times, or I guess in general, about the boom days, kind of like being at Cal Strength, being around some of those guys, Dave Spitz. I saw another guy I love to watch is John North. I saw a video of you guys were lifting at the same time when you're out there. Glenn Penlay, being at Cal Strength. So I guess what was it like there? I get like being part of that time, which I think a lot of people right now would call it, or they have called like the golden age of like weightlifting.
Yeah, I think it's funny because like I've thought about this many times. I think there's like this kind of happens with a lot of stuff. There's this like this bubble effect, right? Where like there's this huge accumulation of everything happening and a lot of like tailwinds all lifting something up. Then it peaks and then it kind of crashes, and comes back to normal, and then it starts to grow again. But that time was a really interesting time because I think there was like 3 or 4 major things happening that were not super obvious, but weightlifting was becoming a little bit more mainstream for many reasons. One largely was that the internet was like, there was a lot more like ability for people to share video on the internet. YouTube was kind of becoming a thing. You could live stream video, like really basically though. So like that was starting to happen where, we were putting videos on the internet, and it was like a very innocent thing. It was just like, oh, let's put this on the internet so we can like save it and like we can watch it and maybe other people watch it. But it wasn't ever like it is now where it's like, let's make a video that we know is going to end up on the internet. It was just this thing. And then CrossFit as well started to really kind of become a thing. There was more people getting exposed to the lifts and getting into it. And then at the same time, to give credit to Dave, like no one had really tried to do a like commercial weightlifting gym, like enterprise kind of thing where he was paying lifters to compete or lift. He never actually paid anyone, but like, it was like, building a team that was essentially this commercial entity. It wasn't just like a club where like Dave was coaching people and like you paid membership and you got coached, you went to meets. It was like, hey, let's try to build this group and make it into something. So I give him a ton of credit for that kind of thing where it was like, that idea was now a reality that like, oh, somebody could be a weightlifter and like, make a salary working at the gym and doing all this stuff. So all that was happening. But when you're in the middle of it, all it felt like was, to be like totally honest, it was just like everyone was just training really hard. We all loved it, but we all kind of thought it was like, we all kind of know this isn't going to go anywhere. None of us are going to make a lot of money at this. So we have to like find jobs at some point. And it was just like, you're in your 20s, you're a young guy, you love lifting, and there's like 5 or 6 other guys just like that. So it was cool. And Glenn Penley was really smart, in that he saw the value of the internet and weightlifting, and like that there was a ton of reach. He was super active on those old forums, the old Go Heavy forums. I don't know if anybody is going to remember that, but
Do you know those?
No, I know them from later, but not from when they were actually going on.
It's like the Dead Sea Scrolls now, right? It's just like this old shit that no one remembers. But it was like a really old style forum where all the weightlifting, entities they were all talking on there to communicate and talk. And he would be on there, and so people would ask questions, and then there was like T Nation. So it's this like whole internet vibe of training that was starting to emerge, and Glenn understood that was something bigger than just dudes on the internet sharing stuff. And so, it was like this kind of perfect storm of all those things. And then more and more people coming out, it growing, getting some traction, and it really grew. And then, turned into what it did.
That's cool. Do you, something you mentioned there as far as like, yeah, we knew we probably weren't going to be like paid to be like professional athletes. And I don't know if there's anyone, there may be maybe a handful of weightlifters right now that's their full-time job, weightlifting, if that's even true. I don't know if they're still doing, maybe they're coaching nutrition or something like that. But do you see any way in the US where that may happen down the road, or what type of things would need to happen to have professional weightlifters?
I think, that's a good question. Cause like, I think that there's like kind of 2 routes to make money with weightlifting. One is like through weightlifting. So like, because weightlifting is your job, you get paid for it. And like, the top athletes in the country get a pretty good stipend. It's very good comparatively to other NGBs. But you're not going to make it's not a career. You can't do this forever, and you can't like retire on it. So that's like one route. And then the other route is like, leveraging the fact that you're doing weightlifting or involved in weightlifting to make money through some other business. So you can like build a name up for yourself and then make money at it. And that's open to anybody. Like, that's kind of interesting. You don't have to be good. In fact, the people making the most money in weightlifting are definitely not the best lifters, right? They're either coaches, or they're, they have a business, or they're an influencer type. So like, that's kind of an open thing. Like, you can use weightlifting as a vehicle to make money that, I think is a viable thing, right? Like, I think a lot of people have been able to do that. Not everybody's making the same amount, but I think there's people definitely making a living off it.
Totally.
It's almost like the energy and time required to make a lot of money in weightlifting takes away from the time that you would have to put into the sport to get good at it.
Yeah, I mean,
so
both.
There was something I heard, and let me know your thoughts on this. It was on a Travis Mash podcast a while back, and one of his theories was that if we can start to get it ingrained in the like high school, college, and then it becomes more of like a scholarship type sport, that could be one avenue to kind of like grow it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's probably the most likely vehicle for weightlifting to become a successful, like, I don't know what that means, but like a wildly successful thing, is if it became like an NCAA sport. Like, it would just be overnight. We would start seeing massive amounts of talent flood into the sport. And there's like a high school programs in Florida, right? So they have a high school weightlifting program, and it's big. There's hundreds of kids that compete in it at those meets. But if it was in a university setting, it would be a totally different game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the guys I just had on, you might know the name, Crisanto D'Agostino.
Oh yeah,
He's a youth worlds, well, not youth anymore, but he came from a high school in Minnesota, Moorhead High, that they do like massive weightlifting meets there. And he told me about it. I'm like, in high school, actually, they have. So it's growing in some places, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I had a question about back when you were training at Cal Strength, compared to now. What do you think the biggest differences are in the ways that people were training then versus now? And then also the lifters' mindsets then versus now, for better or for worse?
Yeah, I would say the difference is the most obvious difference is that back then, and I don't mean this in like a critical way of Glenn, but when I look at the way Glenn coached, and I've talked to other people, like I wouldn't consider him like a particularly particularly great. Like his coaching system was much more about recruiting than it was about, and like creating an environment, than it was about like he's kind of, very clever in his programming or analytical or methodical. He was just like, get 5 super strong dudes in the gym and push them as hard as possible. And I think we've learned by now that that's just not necessarily the recipe that is like universally successful. It doesn't mean that you don't train hard, but like there's just a definite, like a much more logical approach, I guess, which is to say, like, find out how the athlete's responding to training and adjust the training based on how they're responding. If somebody is making progress and you're, continue to add volume or intensity or whatever it is, like you kind of stay on that road. It's kind of like this, like, I would say now the general trend is, in some places, is just a little bit more of a methodical approach to say, let's collect some data, see what's happening, and make a judgment about that, versus the like Texas method squat plus maxing out 3 times a week. That works like in the short term, and it's like, it's good, but like very quickly, like a lot of those guys you watched back then, it was like everybody was too beat up and missing a lot of lifts and wrecked. And like you see lifters now just don't quite look that way. I think it's even more obvious if you look at powerlifting. Powerlifting is a good barometer, because you look at the way people train now, and like a lot of people train in ways where like the bar is not even slowing down on their training sets. They're just very methodical and very like calculated in what they're doing. And the lifters in USAPL powerlifting are extraordinarily better than they were just 7 years ago.
And the depth is like outrageous too.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So it's like clearly the training methodology has refined itself and is much more appropriate. And you see that even in the lifters in the US, right? Like you look at like the way a lot of people are training. Granted, the Olympic quad, the qualification has an impact because people just get fucked up because you've got to do ridiculous number of meets.
Do all that,
yeah. But like, there's just a smarter approach. You see people making a lot of lifts, looking better in competition, just looking generally a little bit sharper, and not as like brute force your way through it.
What about culturally? What do you think is the biggest change, like 2010 compared to now?
I would say the biggest cultural change probably stems from like the idea of like you can use weightlifting as a vehicle to build some following and sort of fame, right? Like you can have an Instagram account that has 150,000 followers on it, and you just stay focused on that, doing lifting as a way to produce content. Versus before, it was like that was never an option. So lifting was always either like you did it because you loved it, or you did it because you're really good at it, and someone was kind of helping you, try to achieve something. But there was always this idea that like the vehicle of weightlifting is not something that like lasts forever. And so, there's a lot more, I feel like there's a lot more culturally with lifters, like this idea that like they probably have more scrutiny on them. So they want to show off something more, or, do things in a way that allows them to sort of stay relevant, versus like before it was like you just lift and lift and lift and do your meets, and then when it's over, you retire. Now there's definite, you can sense there's a definite, like the culture is moving towards, like from a coaching perspective, moving towards telling people how great you are as a coach, recruiting people, selling your products and services, which I don't think is wrong. There's nothing wrong about this. Just like, people see the commercial entity side of it. So there's a lot more of that feeds into the culture.
Do you think it takes away from the purity or integrity of the sport at all? Or what do you think about that?
I don't think so. I think every generation is going to look at the next generation as like, they're doing it different. They're lazy.
My day.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like I think the best thing in the world is that, like, I look at it like it's a if those people didn't exist, you know, everyone can think of their most hated, cringy weightlifting influencer account, right? Pick the one you want. But think about, like, if that person didn't exist, if they quit, that would be a worse thing for us, because it means that, you know, if the cringiest YouTube weightlifting influencer or Instagram influencer out there can't make any money, that means it's going to get the market is constricting. If the market's contracting, then we're all in a worse place, because when there's less money, there's less people, there's less attention, there's less stuff going on. So really what you hope is that there is this frothy bubbling up of, like, shithead, you know, weightlifting idiots, for a better, you know, no better term, you know, like,
yes.
Me included. I'm one of them, right? Like, you know, like, you want that because that means that the market is getting bigger. It means it's expanding.
Right.
You know, some regular dudes like, I think I can make money in weightlifting. That's great, because that means
It brings more opportunity.
Good people are capable there.
Yeah, cool. Did you want to?
No, go for it.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about coaching.
Yeah.
You've worked with a lot of great coaches, and I'm curious, maybe there wasn't one, but if there were a few that had the biggest impact on your coaching style career, and maybe generally what you could, like, what we could learn from you.
Yeah. I would say, like, the three coaches that, maybe four coaches that had, like, the biggest impact on me were, and each for a different reason. So, like, coaching is like a conglomeration of several different, like, elements that you have to bring to the table. There's obviously, like, the technical side, like, you have to know and understand how to do the sport, how to train and write programming, and have a scientifically kind of minded approach, right? So that that's very important. The other side is that, like, you have to be able to communicate with people. Like, you have to be a good communicator. And so the, like, element of communication is paramount. If you don't have that, you'll never be able to coach anybody. And then the other side is, like, you have to be a person who has the ability to have vision. And, like, by vision, I mean, like, this big picture sort of vision of, like, what this person is now and what they could be later. And I think to be a really great coach, you kind of have to have all three of those things well established. The fourth sort of piece would be that you probably want to have done it on some level, so you can relate and understand. It just facilitates the other three. But that first side, that, like, real technical coaching side, like, largely influenced for me by time spent with Borshiko, and then, you know, also whatever I learned, you know, while I was at, like, Juggernaut, like, just this idea that, like, hey, there are definitely, everything's a trade-off. Every decision you make's a trade-off, but there's usually a better or worse choice. And our goal should always be to try to make less bad choices as we go. You know, so whether we do this kind of workout or squats or pulls or these movements or these exercises, like, we're not picking right and wrong. We're picking we're choosing a trade-off. The trade-off for doing no contact cleans is that, you know, you're going to use less weight and the movement's not going to be as specific, but the benefit might be that they improve their technique, and, you know, that makes a big difference. So that element of that really was conveyed to me a lot through those two, that kind of, you know, Sheko and Chad and Israel and those guys. Like, for sure, there's, like, this idea that, like, science isn't giving us definitive answers, but it gives us a better process to build things. The communication side of it, very much, I would say the two people influenced me a lot there was Goff, my first coach, and then Penlay. When I first met Penlay, it was just like, I saw him first as, like, the first coach I'd ever met that was not yelling at his lifters, you know.
I've heard stories of Goff, how he would get fiery.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Goff would have been, Goff did some criminal things. Like I mean, the level of intensity from Goff was unbelievable. But that was the kind of thing where it was like, that to me tied into this idea of this vision, because, you know, golf was a great communicator at getting you to believe in yourself. When you met him, you either loved him or hated him. And if you loved him, within like 10 minutes, you believed as much as he did that you were going to win the Olympic Games. Like he just would set his sights on, that's what we're going to do. And he had no doubt that it was possible. And obviously it isn't for everybody, but like that kind of like visionary element was like so huge, because he always had this bigger picture in mind, which is like, you're not stuck at 100-kilo snatch. Like, we're going to do 180 one day. Granted, maybe only do 110, but like, it was like that belief is like super inspiring.
Sure.
And so that visionary element there was huge. And Glenn was kind of that first guy that I met that was not rah, yell at somebody. He was very like deliberate, kind of soft-spoken is the wrong word, but like he just would speak to you like a person. You got on your toes early, stay back on your heels, bring the bar back in. And it was like, wow, that's really cool to see somebody coach like that, because I had never seen it. I just saw the craziness of golf. And even Abujayev was like the opposite. He was just like a black hole. Like, it just meant nothing. Like, if you hit a PR yesterday, that's great. Today's the new day. So like, yeah, those elements, I think, all for me are the things that influence me a lot, is like just seeing that, like, to put together a great coach, you got to have a lot of these elements that really help you, deliver on all those things.
Cool. Yeah, that was great. Really. Oh yeah. So I guess touching on where you're going next, Thailand. You've been traveling a lot. You've seen a lot of these competitions, and it's from a commentary standpoint instead of coaching standpoint. So I was curious what you've been able to take away from that perspective in a coaching lens compared to being in the thick of it. And because sometimes you can get caught up in the moment in the coaching, and it's nice to step away and look at it from an outside lens. So I'm curious what you've been gaining from that's been helping your coaching.
Yeah, I would say the couple things I would say, having been at these meets so much, that some people might not want to hear, but like, most of the rest of the world is not doing this much better than we are. There's this illusion that like, oh yeah, like China's got some secret training system, or their technique's way better, or this guy's doing XYZ. Like, there's a lot of coaching mistakes going on, just like weird attempt selections. Seb and I, so many times on the commentary, have been like, we don't know why this guy's taking this number. It doesn't do them any good. Or like 1 kilo more is a record or a win. And like, so there's a lot of that. There's also like just looking at how people train going into it. The Italian team's a good example. Like, a lot of what we see with the Italian team is like, it's like a lot of this, the coach basically dictates everything. And I don't know if he writes anything down, but like their training is very, like, I would describe as intuitive and like sort of by feel. And he's just coaching them all the way through. And like every lift, he's like watching every lift, and that sounds really cool. But then you're also like, but then in competition, like, they're missing a lot of lifts, and they open heavy and they miss and they don't do very well overall. So it's like, I think when you don't have clear data, like you don't have somebody compiling all this and showing it, it's kind of easy to get lost in the hype of like, oh, well, look how big the numbers they're trying are. And it's like, well, yeah, but they're missing. And then, also other stuff you see, like, the Georgian team, Lasha seems to have pretty like sharp technique for who he is, but a lot of the other lifters look very different, and you don't know, is it that they don't use the same, like, you rarely see all of them doing the exact same kind of stuff, but some of them just have rugged technique. And maybe that's something I don't understand, but it's like, you'd think there'd be a little bit more unification of things and a little bit more of like an approach that like is really
like a technical
dialed
model.
In. Yeah.
They're trying to follow over.
Yeah. If you look at some of the American coaches, I would like, like a Spencer, Spencer does a good job. Like, a lot of his lifters lift very well, even though they have different styles of lifting. And you can tell that comes from like an approach that is standardized to the, let's do these movements to improve these qualities. Let's train like this. Let's be in good shape on the day of the meet. Whereas, yeah, you see a lot of other clubs that just don't have that sort of thing. I think it comes from them trying to play catch up after like the drug era, Well,
Mhm.
the previous drug era kind of knocked everyone down, right? So now there's like this new era where like people are doing things like they used to, but they need to maybe adjust for it and figure things out. All that being said, they're still lifting huge weights. So like, you
Mm.
know, we have to remember that like they are winning and they are lifting big weights. But yeah, it's odd. It's just like you'd think there'd be more teams that were just like in a sport that's so refined, really like just dialed in, super methodical approaches.
Mm.
But it
Almost like a
feels,
golf swing. Like,
yeah,
like you go to you watch a major tournament, everybody's kind of doing
yeah,
the same stuff.
yeah. You'd think there'd be like a little bit more of this, like, oh man, everyone's doing it. And I think the Russians were that team.
Mm.
They had a very distinct training structure and system and a methodical approach. Their lifters all looked really good technically. They're all gone now. So they were also doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. But yeah, it's like there's definitely that kind of element's kind of gone.
Any U.S. lifters that you're really excited about for this coming Olympics?
I mean,
It's tough.
Olivia
Okay.
Reeves, hands down. Yeah. I mean, Olivia Reeves, I think, is going to be like one of those, like, she is not the best female lifter we've ever had yet. Maddie Rogers, I would say, probably is, or Cheryl Hayworth, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Sarah Robles.
Sure.
Robles has multiple Olympic medals. Like, you can't deny that's like just the highest level of achievement. Maddie has the most medals internationally, I would imagine. But I think Olivia has this quality, which is like she might be the strongest female lifter we'll ever have. Like I could see her doing numbers that are just like wild and things we didn't expect from a female lifter. So she'll be a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like she's just starting to like get all that just at the right time, and she's just going to be like prime for the Olympics.
Yeah, she could do some damage.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
How about from the men's side?
Man, Hampton,
big
I
side.
mean, it's Hampton Morris.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like a negative way. It's just kind of like, you know, it's like Damron and West Kitts are like the only guys that kind of have they're like kind of the ones to look at to see if they're going to get a spot. Yeah. But even if they had the best days of their lives at this meet, and then 12 weeks later, the best day of their life at the Olympics, it's not going to be the same kind of performance Hampton's going to have. I think if Hampton if they can improve his snatch, which is just like a massive problem right now, then he would be dangerous in that class. I mean, he's clean.
He's drinking world records. It's absurd.
I mean, he could have done that world record in Bulgaria.
Yeah,
they would have turned it down no matter what fucking happened. I guarantee it. It would have been red. It would have gotten 3 whites. It would have been angels come down and doves fly out of his elbows, locked out perfectly. And there's 100% chance that the Bulgarian jury would have fucking turned that lift over. So I was hoping he was going to put 76 on, but I think he'll do it at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Because that would just be like the ultimate victory.
Yeah,
he'll be cool to watch. Yeah,
for sure.
That's cool. Well, I want to get into because I don't want to spend too much of your time. So we have a little bit of time left, but I want to get into some technique questions next.
Yeah.
So my first one is, and I see this all the time because I'm mostly in CrossFit gyms. I kind of bounce back and forth to the dark side, but one of the big things that I see you see, I think we all see, is CrossFitters that can power squat or power snatch more than they can squat snatch, or as they call it. So what are some, I mean, obviously a lot of these questions are very open-ended, but I guess what are some of the first things you look at if you see somebody like that?
Yeah. So the way I look at training now, and especially exercise selection, is early on as a coach, I used to look at things as like, you have this problem, you do this movement and it fixes this problem. And the way I look at it now is kind of like you have a way of executing the lift, right? So you organize yourself in a way that you're going to perform the movement. And if you constrain the lift to different things, so like, for example, if you do a lift from the hang, you are forcing the athlete to behave in a certain way. And so incorporation of that movement that has constraints has a transference of that kind of constraint element to the technique itself. So knowing this, like the way that special exercises should be selected is in a way that you can saturate the program with movements that basically overwhelm the athlete's technique with the things that are going to make it move the way you want. So if somebody power snatches more than they snatch, they full snatch, the first thing I look at is like, one, do they have a good understanding of how to get into a full snatch? Like if they can't do it with even the bar, or they just don't know what to do, or the timing is off, that's mostly just a matter of giving them more exposure to snatches and less to power snatches, regardless of the weight on the bar, right? So if you just do more snatching, you'll start to improve that and get some familiarity with it. If you have good familiarity and you can do a full snatch well, but you power snatch because there's some mobility issue or some other physical constraint, like your legs are super weak or you can't move under the bar because you're really tight, then you have to eliminate that general fitness quality. So improve flexibility and mobility, build up the strength of the muscles that, are going to support the joint in that end range of motion. If those things are satisfied, they know how to do it, they can physically do it, then it's a matter of, one, eliminating the thing that's wrong. So never do power snatches, again, until you can do full snatches. Because every rep you do is giving you exposure to some stimulus. If you keep ingraining a movement pattern you don't want, you're just going to get worse at it. So then I would say only do lifts that force the issue of turning the bar over and sitting into the hole. So movements like anything that increases the reliance on speed under the bar into the hole. So from a general strength thing or perspective would be like snatch balances and drop snatches and snatch recoveries and overhead squats. That's going to build a general foundation of strength in that position and comfort there. And then saturate the program with movements that force them to move under the bar faster. So hang snatches, things from above the knee, power position, those kind of elements as just movements, right? As isolation movements. So do these on their own as workouts. Then as they start to show competency there, start to incorporate those movements as complexes with classic snatches. So hang snatch plus snatch, power position plus snatch, because you want to have some skill transference. You want to build up the ability to do the first thing and then transfer it to the second. And then you start to move into competition phase where you start to eliminate some of that and just try to hold on to whatever qualities you did develop with it as you get closer to a meet.
Cool. I like that. I think you had one on there.
Oh yeah. Mine is less of a technical question and more of a, I don't know, maybe a programming question, but I've listened to you talk about squatting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you used to have a massive squat, but I've also heard you say that training just for the squat alone is going to take away from becoming a good weightlifter. So what have you found is like that good balance of, we want to get stronger, but we don't want it to take away from the actual weightlifting movements themselves?
Yeah. I mean, what I've found is that, if your squatting and pulling volume, if you're that kind of like static strength volume is in excess of about 50% of your total volume, you're going to start to become, you're probably not going to be making the best program you could. I think that's like the most general guideline, is that it shouldn't really comprise much more than a total of about 50% of your volume.
Yeah.
But ultimately it doesn't need to be even close to that high. A lot of the training volume in squatting and pulling, should be such that it is driving the number of the squat higher without negatively impacting the snatch and clean and jerk. So that means that a lot of your squatting should be very deliberate. If you're going to squat 4 times a week, there has to be a specific reason for that. If you're going to squat, twice a week, like you have to make sure that that's an appropriate amount. I would say that based on what I've seen now and my shift in programming overall from what I've experienced both in powerlifting and weightlifting, is that, if you want to break it down by like sets, somewhere between 10 and 15 sets in a week on squats should be sufficient enough to drive progress in those lifts. Mm-hmm. If you're doing way in excess of that, 30 or 40 sets or something, you're probably spending a lot of time on something that's unnecessary. That being said, there's certainly people out there that might benefit from that are, who knows what, they're small and not super strong. Mm-hmm. But if you're getting up into these like squatting, like the idea of squatting every day to me, I did it for a decade. It's just like, why are you spending time practicing the squat? Like, they do always like light squat workouts, or like, you know, I'm going to do like an easy squat workout. It's like pointless. It's like energy going nowhere. Like, it's not making you stronger in a squat. You don't need to be good at the skill of squatting. So why are you doing these like insignificant, smaller squat workouts? So yeah, I would say, like, as very general guidelines, you know, if you're in that 10 to 20 sets in a week in squat, your squat should be moving up. I would also say something I've done a lot more of, you know, over the last few years is like incorporating testing as training. So like monitoring as training, where we would do like heavy singles or top singles at a certain, you know, designated like RPE or designated intensity, as a way to gauge whether we're actually getting stronger. So if every week you're touching a single in the squat that is, you know, not moving upward, then start adding volume in. And if that single starts climbing up, you know you're getting stronger. So that's kind of like the key elements of like building a good squat program, is you got to know if you're getting stronger, know what to tweak up or down, and then, you know, only do what's necessary to drive results in the lifts.
Right. What do you have to say to the people that always want to just squat heavy, or like see where they're at, or test, or
Powerlifting's a sport, man. That's what I mean. I loved it. Like, I fucking loved squatting. I was my favorite thing to do, you know. I loved front squatting. I was way better at front squatting than back squatting. And we just, that's all we did. I front squatted 230 before I could even deadlift it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And like, yeah, I mean, I was like, but like, squatting as a sport is great, and there's nothing wrong with like loving squatting and doing it. Just understand that that's probably taking away from it may not take away, but it's definitely not going to be, you can't squat your way to a big total.
Right.
So like, if you want to do it, that's fucking cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but like, it's not the thing that's going to make you the best weightlifter.
Yeah. One more question I had.
Yeah.
Not sort of similar to that, but not super similar. But after a weightlifting meet, everybody wants to max out again, like the day after, whether it be their squat or snatch, clean or whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
So like, I come from this perspective largely from all the things I've done over time, which is very much a matter of like, I started in like a super hardcore system, which was just like, I mean, I never said no to training. It was like, you know, max out every single day, every session, 6 hours a day, no problem, let's do it. You know? So I understand that mentality. I think you have to have that mentality that's like just down to do whatever, and be aggressive. You gotta be a fighter. But I also have this like learning over the years of like, there's a very definitive like hierarchy of good and bad choices you can make. So the sort of two sides of my brain in that case, I say to myself, like, as a coach, I'm like, you know, it, like, that's stupid. Like, what are you going to get out of it? Like, you're either going to lift really big numbers and feel like an idiot for not doing it the day before. You're potentially going to get hurt, you know, because like you're probably tired as hell from the day before. But the other side is like, I mean, yeah, go for it. Like, see what happens, right? Like, if you're going to do it, like, let's get some information. But if you do hit bigger numbers, then we can look at maybe there's something to learn from it. But it's just kind of like, you know, to me, it's one of those things of like, if you're that excited to max out the next day, maybe you should have put some more into the meet.
Sure. I think there's something you said on a pod. I forget which podcast it was, but is one lift or one training session isn't going to make you a better lifter, but it could end your career type of thing.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. I mean, yeah, Marcin Pashov told me that.
Okay.
He was like, he would go in the gym sometimes, and like he'd just like Clark like 80 kilos in the snatch, and he'd just snatched like 170 2 days ago, and he'd be like, not today, and that was it. That was the workout. Like, he just wasn't going to do it because he knew, like, I'm not going to do what I'm trying to do today, so why would I hurt myself?
Right. That makes sense.
Live to lift another day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll start the wrap up questions now. One thing I want you to talk about a little bit, because we didn't end up talking about it at all, is your AI weightlifting programming, which you've been doing. I remember I think I was listening to a podcast from you years ago, and you guys had like been rolling that out. So you were way ahead of the game as far as the AI, like way before GPT got big on that. So I guess talk to us a little bit about that. What you guys are doing with the AI programming.
Yeah, so we have a current app that right now just delivers programming, and we partner with Weightlifting House, and what we've built now is we're going to release a new version of this, but it's kind of a different thing. It's a whole coaching platform. So if you think about like True Coach or like Train Heroic, what we've done is basically built from the ground up this kind of platform, but the entire platform is designed with incorporating AI and machine learning techniques into it. So the best way to describe it is like it's like a coaching platform like that, where you'll be able to like write training programs for your athletes, but then all the data collection from what they enter, what they write as comments, can be curated and delivered to a coach in a way that, like, you do a workout and I'm going to get a little breakdown of how that workout went. He did this, this, and this. This is his average intensity and volume, all these things, anything you want. So we'll use AI as a way to sort of collect information and inform coaches of what's going on, so that you don't have to sit there and do like the Google Sheet thing and calculate numbers and all this. It's also the kind of thing that brings coaches who are not doing anything like that immediately up to a level of other people that do. So you can think of it as like, you could be a coach who's much more of I just write things down and we do them and whatever. But now you'll be able to get all of that information at your fingertips. So you're not sitting there questioning stuff. You'll get insights, you get information. And we're using basically like 3 different AI technologies or techniques to sort of do this. One is through like what you call like deep learning, which is just like we have a program generator that we've basically constructed a machine that understands the logic behind building a training program. And then it's built, and made millions of these programs. And we've basically rated whether ones are good or bad, and kind of instructed how to build a program. We also have like a large language model, which is like a ChatGPT that can understand that information and can also interact with the software and do things for you. And then the third component is computer vision. So we've trained computer vision models on thousands of videos of lifts. So it will watch a snatch and break down the different phases of the snatch and can highlight which phase is doing what. And it's not like a bar path thing. This is like actually looking at a snatch from any angle and being able to tell you what you did right or wrong, or what's efficient or what's not efficient, or how this would compare to a previous snatch you did. And so the goal here is to combine all 3 of these elements with a really easy to use platform. So like drag and drop workouts, and you can write your training in and build stuff that's, like you would normally. And so it's kind of this like, it's kind of the most ridiculous project we've ever could have done. Like let's do everything all at once. But we've been working on this for well over a year at this point. And so it's like the original stuff was like, hey, can we generate training programs? Yeah, we can do that. Are they good? Some are good, some are not. Then it was like, hey, can we make an app that does this? Can we make that better? Yes, we've done that. Now it's like, hey, can we combine these multimodal things? Can we combine video, natural language, and then this logic to actually like be like a virtual coach that sits in between you as a coach and the athlete, where you basically can ask it to give you information about the athlete, where their training's going, and what you can do with it. That's kind of the easiest way to describe what it is, like an assistant. It's like I'm there, but I'm the robot Max.
The robot Max is helping you out. I love that. That's cool. I mean, like I said, you guys have been on that for a while, and maybe all I've seen of AI recently, I'm sure it has really good purposes, but people making like funny like pictures or something. So it's cool to see that you guys are using that.
Yeah, I mean, we want to try to bring someone will do this. Like what we've seen, like ChatGPT, there's like video. You've seen like the video generation stuff. There'll eventually be text to video, and then the other way around, which is video to text, where you could put a video into a ChatGPT and it would tell you what's happening in the video. And we've had some of my lead developer his friends all work at places like Microsoft and Tesla and all these places, and they've kind of shared some of these things. Like in the next year, next couple of years, there'll be a day where you can just go on the internet and watch a YouTube video of weightlifting and just ask for commentary, and it would just deliver commentary because it would understand what's happening. And like maybe that's not a year out, 2 years out, but like what's coming down the line is going to be like kind of scary, like where,
It's terrifying.
Like this podcast could be fake, like where you guys are just guys that I scripted to ask me to interview me, right? And like no one would know, right? I could be not real. You could just make guests up, right? You could make a fake Andrew Huberman, right?
That's freaky.
Who's nice to women.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh man. No, that's some really cool stuff. I guess anything else that's coming down. I mean, obviously you're going into Thailand, but anything else coming down the pipeline? Any events? Anything else you're excited about? Anything else you want to plug?
No, I mean, that's it. Like we're going to try to release we're going to get some like MVP sort of testers, beta testers on this platform as soon as we can. But hopefully our goal is to shoot for like a sort of bigger release around the national championships.
Cool. And then last two questions I'll leave you with.
Yeah.
One is how people can find you, but the second is one I asked everybody. I took it from a Tim Ferriss podcast, but so you're in Oakland. What's the major highway that's near you?
There's the 580 and the 880.
All right, I guess we'll choose. I don't know either one. So let's choose 880. So you get a billboard for the day, and you can put. Usually it's your favorite quote, saying, mantra. You put whatever you want to your local community, or I guess weightlifting community. You put whatever you want on the billboard for a day, and I guess what would you put on there? So putting you on the spot for that one.
That's a tough question. I've never even thought of that. I mean, part of me is inclined to do something like ridiculous, like detour or something, or like just something that I would find hilarious.
Turn around.
That like no one else does, right? Like just totally just for my own pleasure. Yeah, something like that. Like road work ahead, a 90-minute delay. Like just.
Hey, that might be legitimate.
There was in that vein, the senior prank when I was in high school was I grew up in Montana, but the senior prank was great. They took 3 pigs and they released them in the school, but they wrote the numbers 1, 2, and 4 on the pigs. And all day over the intercom, they were like, if anyone's seen pig number 3, come to the office and tell us. Like they're looking for this thing that didn't exist. Like I just find that like the perfect joke.
That's fascinating. I love that. That's so good.
Sounds like it's out of a movie.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That's a great answer. I love it. We'll go with that. And then how can people find you? How can people reach you?
Yeah, you can find me, Max_Aita on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube. Check out the Coach Logic YouTube channel, and then the Weightlifting AI Instagram. If you got any questions or remote coaching or anything like that, reach out.
Awesome. Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap up with that. We'll let you get out of here on your flight to Thailand. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much.
It was a really, really fun podcast, and we'll definitely, we'll enjoy getting this out there.